Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to another edition of Facebook Live this Tuesday, 11th of September 2018. Um, one of the many questions we get every time there's any movement at a government level is, what does a new Prime Minister, either at a federal or state level, what does that mean to the property market? And politicians are very, very good at using property to actually get your attention through the media. Okay, it's a common talking point amongst all of us, whether you're an owner-occupier or you're looking to buy your first home, or whether you're an investor. It's a very popular topic, as I'm sure you're well aware of. So our politicians, when wanting to get votes and build up their campaign, use property as a major talking point. I have my own view on this. Again, having studied the market for quite some time, and what that actually does mean. At the moment, we've got the new Prime Minister Scott Morrison on board. They're representing the Liberal government. By the way, was a former treasurer and was a member of the Property Council of Australia. So his background in property is quite significant, and he had a lot to do with APRA, Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, coming in and changing, let's say, the lending criteria for more so investors that were looking to buy into the property market. So if any of you guys have have gone for a loan over the last 2 years, I would say, you would have found that it's been a lot more challenging than what it used to be. Man, I remember 15 years ago going for a loan. You had what we call low doc loans and even no doc loans, right? Where you'd need no documentation, and you'd be able to get a loan, albeit with some terms and conditions around it and maybe a little bit higher interest rates. Then you had what we call low doc loans, where very attractive for business owners, very low documentation required, and you can also get a loan. But some of those products are no longer in existence at the moment. If you can get a low doc loan, I think there's one or two lenders that actually that do it and even do it quite well. Rams, by the way, have a fantastic product in that space. But lending criteria has definitely changed, and APRA's come in over the last few years, and what I would call it created two markets. Okay. One for owner-occupiers, so the government and the banks at large are wanting to provide more to owner-occupiers and get people in the door. The empty nesters, the ones leaving the home, get them their first home. Okay, so with a median price in Melbourne of $870,000 or thereabouts. You could be looking at up to $200,000 in terms of deposit and purchasing costs before somebody could go out there and buy their own home. Okay, so they're certainly wanting to make it a lot more attractive for first home owners. And how they've done that is they've provided incentives such as stamp duty deductions, and even eliminated stamp duty up to $600,000 for a first homeowner. Again, buying your home to live in, right? And then reduce the stamp duty significantly above $600,000. Okay, if you're an investor, there's almost no stamp duty concessions right now, unless you're buying, house and land property where there's two contracts. But again, just check that information before you go out and make a purchase. And interest rates for principal for first homeowners, who are generally having to pay principal and interest on their mortgage, can be well under 4%. I've seen principal and interest rates as little as 3.6%. And you're not going to get that for an investor. Okay, so they're certainly providing incentives for first homeowners, and I think it's fair to say making it a little bit more challenging for investors. Why? They're wanting to give more to first homeowners and give them an opportunity to get into the market, okay, and not compete with investors. So, having studied Scott Morrison and listened to a lot of his speeches and talks regarding property, I know the guy's very pro property, and I do share similar views to him with regards to the property market and where the market is headed. I still think that Australia has a very, very sound property market. I don't believe it's actually overpriced like most people think. Um, you know, if you look at it, you wind the clock back. I think it was what 30, 32, 33 years ago, right? I think the Labor government at that time abolished negative gearing. I can't remember if it was Labor or Liberal. Abolished negative gearing in about 1985-86, and what that effectively did was pretty much collapse the property market. And the same government that abolished it reintroduced it, I think, some 9 months later. So, removing concessions, tax concessions such as negative gearing, which is a big talking point, I personally don't see that happening. Okay, removing it completely. They may tinker with it a little bit. And there's been some talk to just to remove negative gearing from all but new property. I still don't think that is going to take place. First of all, understand what negative gearing is, okay? And it allows one to offset the losses on a property against their taxable income, okay? So any losses that one experiences on a property pre-tax, they're able to claim those losses against their taxable income. So it basically means that the money... Okay, so when you remove things like negative gearing, you have to have a look at the effects of that, right? If I'm an investor and I can no longer claim tax deductions, and again, I think I mentioned this in one of my earlier posts, never go buy property as an investor for negative gearing benefits, okay? That's really a side effect. As I always said, buy for capital growth. You're not going to build wealth from property. If you take the buy and hold strategy, you're not going to build wealth from property unless you're buying for capital growth, okay? Have a look at one of my earlier Facebook Lives where I cover that off in more detail. But once you remove things like negative gearing, most investors will then want to ensure that the rent that they receive is greater than the mortgage repayments, the interest on their mortgage plus rental expenses, okay? So what effectively those people end up doing is raising their rents so high that you then start to affect the rental market, okay? So you take with this hand, but you're going to have to give with that hand, so or vice versa. So I don't see negative gearing being abolished, and I also don't actually see it being just limited to new houses. When you're building new homes, you're creating employment, okay? If all of a sudden you stifle the new housing market, it creates a ripple effect. You start to affect the employment industry, right? And again, construction is the third biggest industry in Australia, behind healthcare and retail. And I think the last thing the government actually wants is for all these people to be out of jobs, because people that have invested in property are no longer buying new property, so property ain't being built, and it's then basically just left to owner-occupiers. So I don't really see that is going to happen. There's also capital gains tax concessions, where instead of getting a 50% concession after 12 months, there's talk of limiting that to a 25% concession only. Again, it's, I think, more done to get your attention through the media. But and it's a topic that every time there's an election, or it always comes up. But if you look at Australia's economy as a whole, there's too much of the property market is tied in to our economy and employment. So the government will have to be very, very careful with regards to just how much that they move to the left or to the right with regards to that. Remember too that owner-occupiers make up 70% of the market, okay? Investors really are no more than 30% of the market. And given what APRA's done and what the banks have done, they've really created two markets, one for investors and one for owner-occupiers. So don't get too alarmed by that. The advice I always have for our clients is, you've really got to create your own economy. The last thing you want to do is be in control or be controlled by government policies, okay? Now, whilst you may have to work around some of those policies and adjust your thinking and your strategy, the last thing you want to do is have the government determine your financial future, or anybody for that matter of fact. So the principles that we that we advise on, and the principles I followed and our investors have followed are still going to be the same moving forward. You know, the one thing's for certain, okay? The system of working 9 to 5 for 40 years and then retiring on government assistance or a pension, whatever you want to call it. I know of no one that's built wealth of any type, any significance, that's followed that system. Okay, so you really need to have a look at, you know, if you're one of these people that are just working 9 to 5, saving what you can at the end of each week and each fortnight, and not really paying attention to where you're going financially, I can promise you one thing: at some point, that's going to catch up with you. Okay. And sadly, it catches up with most of us when we have very little influence over the outcome. Okay? So you get to a point, usually much, much later on in life, where you realize this, and what I'm talking about right now, the penny does drop for everybody. It just depends on when. But the penny does drop for everyone, and you want to be in a position where you can still influence your outcome. Okay? Unfortunately, the later you leave this, the more difficult it becomes. Okay? Please don't rely on the government to look after you in retirement. I don't think they're going to be in a position to do so. They've got other things that they need to put their money into, and government assistance and looking after you is not one of them. Okay, it's certainly that whilst they've got, you know, allocated budgets for that, it's not their primary focus. In Victoria alone, I think earlier this year, the budget allocated $8 billion to infrastructure. There's some amazing infrastructure projects going on in Victoria. So don't don't hope out there that, you know, she'll be right and the government will take care of us. This is what my parents, you know, when I was growing up, you know, it made me believe and, you know, put forward as an ideal that, you know, work 9 to 5, work hard and don't ask a lot of questions, keep your head down, bum up, work for a government company, and, you know, you'll get the pension. So times have changed. Have a look into this, guys. It's whether it's a Labor government or a Liberal government, the last thing you want to do is pray and hope that these people are going to be your saviour later on. It's not going to happen. Okay, get educated, get a lot of knowledge in this space, right? There's plenty of knowledge out there. Okay, you can find anything you want right now regarding, you know, investment, finance, you know, government policies, retirement, funding, financial planning, or come in and have a chat to us. Okay, get knowledge, get a lot of knowledge in this area so you can increase your responsibility in this space. Okay, I know that this subject is something that a lot of people don't confront or don't want to confront, and therefore, you know, basically alleviate themselves of any responsibility around it. It's something that at some point we all need to confront. Okay, so whether it's Scott Morrison, Bill Shorten at a federal level, or Matthew Guy or Daniel Andrews at a state level here in Victoria, whilst they, you know, I don't think the changes they're going to make aren't going to affect the status quo too much. I'm all for, to be honest with you, I'm actually all for what's happened with the banks at the moment, with the Banking Royal Commission, and even APRA to some extent. I won't get into it now, but with regards to interest rates sitting at that 6-7% is actually healthy for the market. I'll get into that probably over the next few weeks. I'll go live on interest rates because they're very misinterpreted, and the one thing we find with a lot of people is it's the first thing they look at when they go to the bank is the interest rate. And I'm going to tell you that it's probably the last thing you need to look at, especially if you're looking to do this long term. If you're looking to invest long term, whilst interest rates are important, too many people put all their emphasis on interest rates, and that can actually be a bad thing. So, but I'll cover that off in the next few weeks. So, you know, don't get too alarmed come election time with regards to what our politicians are going to do. And it's a good idea to understand the economy as a whole and how the property market fits into that. And if you understand that, you'll see that there's you know, there's not a lot that these guys can do, because the one thing they want to protect is greater economy. They want to protect their revenues, right? Their tax revenues around stamp duty, capital gains tax, negative gearing. They want to make sure we've got a healthy economy. But they also want to do their bit for owner-occupiers as well. So I don't see too much happening with Scott Morrison moving forward. I actually quite like the guy. He's a lot of what he says is actually quite sane. But you know, don't go putting all your eggs in his basket. Make sure you can create your own economy. Okay, so irrespective of who's in government, whether it's Labor or Liberal, it doesn't affect your outcome, and that's the most important thing, because that way you're in control. So get knowledge up in this area, raise your responsibility, which comes with having more knowledge, so you can actually then control the outcome. Last thing you want to do, the first thing we talk about with all our investors is you want a predictable outcome, right? Investing gives you a predictable outcome. If you're doing it properly, there's no guesswork. You don't sit here and say, wow, this is where I may end up in 40 years or 30 years' time. If you're investing correctly, you can shore that up. You can know exactly where you're going to be. Speculating is something else. And this is what a lot of us are doing today. We're speculating on certain investment asset classes. We're speculating on what the government is going to do or not do. So what we're essentially doing is giving all the power we're getting rid of all our power. We're giving the power to the government. We're giving power to other people that manage our money and look after our money. Where what you really should be doing is get knowledge up in this area, raise your responsibility, which will come by having more knowledge. So then you can control your outcome. You don't need Labor, you don't need Liberal, and you're not going to care too much if interest rates move a little south or a little north, right? Because a sound investment strategy takes all that into account and puts you in control of your financial future. So you know exactly where you're going to be each year moving forward. So don't rely on the government to help you. I personally, in my own view, is it's actually not even their job to help you. Okay, and don't give them those guys too much power. Right, working 9 to 5 is a system that's never ever worked. And if you have a look at, like I say to my clients and my staff, show me somebody that's retired on say $100,000 to $150,000 a year by only working 9 to 5 for their entire life. Okay, this system of earning an income, paying tax, handling your expenses, and saving what's left, it's never worked. It never will work. Okay, it's actually not designed to work for the average Australian. Okay, so you need to think outside of that box, and you need to look at how you can take more control over your financial future, so you don't have to rely on anything or anyone to dictate that for you. So that's pretty much what all I've got to say with regards to this subject today. Just get knowledge up, raise your level of responsibility in that area so you get the power, and then you'll start to see when you do those things, you can actually control a lot more of your outcome. And I don't think there's anything. One of the greatest things I get from working with so many people is that when you see their level of education and knowledge increase, they feel so much more compelled to move forward. You could say that as knowledge goes up, risk goes down, which is a fair call, and they feel more. They get more certainty in where they're going. Okay. So if you're not certain of where you're going and you think, oh my God, I'm gonna, the government is gonna move one way, and the Labor government's gonna move the other way, it's because you're not in control to start off with. All right. So that's. I think that's I think that's my message for today. Don't rely too much on what the governments are going to do. Look, if you look back in time, the Labor government and the Liberal government, irrespective of who's in play, no self-made person's going to tell you that one or the other was the reason why they got to where they got to. All right. So let's have a look. Any questions we've got? Yep, answered that. Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, Adrian. Got all that off, and somebody sent through a picture of a nice car. Okay. wrong wrong Facebook post, but thank you very much. It's actually a very nice car. So guys, thank you for listening in. Send through any questions you've got with regarding this topic. I'm more than happy to answer them for you. And any questions or any topics that you'd like me to discuss moving forward, please let us know. I do this for you guys, right? I do this for you guys. I want to answer what questions you guys have got out there and what it is you want to hear about. I've invested in the market for, 18 years, and there's nothing that I haven't seen in the market. You know, I've made mistakes. I've done very, very well. I've done the good. I've done the bad in the market. And I've learned a lot along the way. You know, I certainly know what doesn't work, having pretty much tried everything. So, and having been through, I think, four property cycles as well, with, you know, Labor and Liberal governments at play. So, send through any questions you've got. I'm happy to discuss any questions that you have with you, or any topics that you want to hear me cover off on. We're live every Tuesday from midday. We do it for you guys. We want to help you get educated and give you some data to maybe some information that's not there for you right now. And again, thank you for listening in. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys again next Tuesday at midday. Thanks.